Okay, councillors, so page 87, item 16, and welcome, and I'll hand over to HBRIC.
Well, thanks, Chairman. I'll lead off with the report. So if I just find my page here. 89, great. Okay, just really just to give you a bit of a feel. I don't intend to go through every item here, I'll just pick out some of the highlights. Firstly, obviously, there's a couple of bullet points on HBRIC itself around the independent directors, and the statement of intent is on the agenda, or the draft statement of intent. Turning to the RWSS, we're planning, subject to some work being done between the board and our commercial lawyers, Bell Gully, and with a bit of input from investors to bring concession deed and project agreement forward to the strategic planning, strategic and corporate meeting on the 12th of March. Those documents really are sort of the foundation stone of the way in which HBRC relates to the scheme, and fairly fundamental actually in terms of the whole structure, so quite important. Secondly, yep.
I guess we go through,
Yeah, it's fine.
Can I just ask a question of timing of that? You're using terms like targeting. We're only 2 weeks off, so I must have a fair idea whether we do or not. But if not to the corporate and strategic, would it come then to the full council meeting directly?
Yes, potentially. I'll defer to the chairman a wee bit on that. But it's certainly what we're trying to do is make sure that piece of work is handled in pardon the colloquialism, but a bite-sized chunk. There's enough in those documents, let alone the business case, to keep everybody entertained for a while. So we're trying to break some of it apart and just and give you manageable information. Okay.
Yes, Councillor Scott. So, as Andrew has said, we'll try to bring you chunks of the documentation here. I think we're reasonably confident we will be ready to bring this to the strategic committee, but if not, it will definitely come to the next council meeting, and we're hopeful that we'll bring the business case to the council at that meeting as well. I'd like to give you the opportunity, though, to digest a piece at a time, which is why we're proposing to split them between those two meetings.
Okay, moving on. Investment recommendation to HBRC. We are proposing to bring that investment recommendation business case forward to the March meeting. I note that there will still be condition precedent issues in it. They'll be very clearly identified, and by condition precedent issues, those will be conditions that must be met prior to financial close or at financial close, basically. So clearly there's a consent issue there. Yep.
Two, under your conditions precedent, you do say all investors agreeing. I question whether you actually need this dependent on all. You could have one small little chunk of water outstanding. Should the target not be a percentage of water committed?
No, I think you're sorry, Councillor, you're mixing up two issues there, I think. What I'm saying, when all investors
yeah, okay, yeah,
agree,
sorry, yeah,
clearly they've all got to agree, basically.
Yeah,
so
yes.
that's
sorry,
that.
I did muddle the sufficient water uptake, and
yeah,
my fault.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman, just a further follow-up on that is, so this late March 2014 business case, is that treated as the business case that triggers the Deloitte 30-day work window?
It's treated as the business case. It's the Deloitte's work window is the council's issue. But what I can say is that it's the business case that Deloitte's reviews, but equally beyond that, Deloitte's will obviously investigate things such as the financial model, validate that. They'll look at construction contracts issues, those sorts of things, and Deloitte's have already contacted us about getting into that detail. Okay, but I'd defer to the CEO to deal with the council part of that process. Okay.
So once the business case has been received by council,
This was referred to here.
Yes, yeah. So once HBRIC has submitted its business case to council, we propose that we then submit or deliver that to Deloitte for them to be working on. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I would note, though, they've actually started now. Yep.
Their clock
Yeah.
is contingent on when we deliver them the business
Yep.
case to review.
That, Mr. Chair, that ends their clock, more relevant to you. That starts the beginning of what is going to be the end. You're looking at the time frame, aren't you? The total time frame. Andrew, you're looking to get 60 farmers contracted. Have you got a time frame for that?
Yeah, Rex, effectively what we've got today is we've actually got 109 expressions of interest. So we've got a clearly identified target market and customer base there. They're our primary focus, as opposed to new. Having said that, there are some new leads. But there are three things we've had to get really synced up before we can start moving on that contractual uptake work stream. We had to have a water price that we felt was within the bounds of reasonable certainty. Secondly, we've clearly got to have a contract, and the last residual issues associated with the contract have been dealt with now. So, and I note when I talk about the water contract or the water access contract, that's still condition precedent. In other words, any contract signed into by any potential customer is condition precedent on other elements, consent, financial close, those sorts of things. And the third key document, which is really it's a blend of capital raising as well as of significant interest to potential customers, is what we've called a preliminary information memorandum. And I'll come back to that and discuss that explicitly in a minute. But those three documents are really ready to go now within the week. So we've got 4 months to convert that issue.
So I may have got that question wrong, because it's actually you're targeting 40%. Is that 40% of area or 40% of?
It's 40% of the available water.
Of available water.
Yeah, at a
So
security
that may
level.
not compute. That could compute to all sorts of.
Yeah, it could do. But to give you a feel for irrigable area on the back of expressions of interest and different land uses, it's about 13,000 hectares. Yep.
Just on the investors, does that include the Crown Irrigation
Yes,
Company?
does. Yep.
Okay. Is there any reason why you'd be concerned about any of the investors, including them, falling by the wayside?
Oh, I think, you're always concerned because it's ultimately financial close means that we're having to, if you like, blend investors with slightly different objectives. Institutional investors have an expectation of a rate of return that meets their commercial weighted average cost of capital, or a reasonable degree of security. They want to look at the risk allocation issues, those sorts of things, all of which is part of the business case development, and really part of the review that Deloitte will do for you. So what's the risk allocation issue? And taking the case of Crown Irrigation Investments, through their journey, they were established in June of 2000, or the end of June of 2013. Took them about 4 months to get themselves a full-time a CEO appointed. So we went on a circling pattern with that conversation for about 4 months. New CEO comes in, and they have tweaked their investment criteria, in a reasonably solid way, from originally suggesting that the investment would be equity to suggesting that the investment would be highly concessionary debt based. So we've had to work all of that into the model basically alongside other investors. So the reality is the complexity around the investor process or the financial capital raising process is aligning all of those interests into a workable model that's durable, and that's work in progress.
So has that change in the allocation of funds or potential allocation of funds from the Crown Irrigation Company, has that changed the view of any of the other investors?
Oh, I think it's fair to say that part of the negotiation process is around, without getting into absolute explicit stuff because can't us under commercial confidentiality, but it's fair to say that every investor looks at their own return expectations They look at the cash flows over a period of time through the uptake curve, and in the Crown's case, on their investment criteria, they eventually want to be able to exit. In other words, they legitimately want to be able to recycle the capital. So we've got to find a sweet spot in terms of everybody having those needs met. Really.
Tabaka.
I think I'll just draw your attention firstly to a minor thing under the heading summary. The second bullet point writes RWSS execution. I thought this might have been a Freudian slip. You might want to think of another word. I know it's within the realm, what you're proposing is within the realm of definition of the word, but I thought you might be trying to tell me something more here. I want to come back to the bottom of the page, and I want to talk about sufficient contracted water uptake.
Yep.
I get the point that it's 40%, what I want out of this is I want a clear statement of what the waypoint is. By that I mean a point at which we're navigating this, all these conditions have to be met. And I want to know what that date is. I want to know what the actual definition of it is. You've said 40% of the available water contracted, but there may be 40% of the contracts you have to which people who are on the far-flung reaches of the irrigation scheme you're not going to come to. So I want to know that it's 40%, and it's 40% that you are going to irrigate water to, and I want to know the date by what it is, and I want to know whether it's in a contracted clause. In other words, subject to all of the things you've got in your contract, variations, but someone has signed the dotted line, not an expression of interest. I know there has been some discussion about Central Hawke's Bay farmers. If they express interest in it, it's better than a shake of the hand and a signed thing that they'll stick with. I've heard that. But I'm an old-fashioned sceptic. I like to see the pen and ink hit the page and the signature be finished. And once I see that, then I'm pretty convinced. So I want to know what it is we're going to get with definition and certainty and dates and clarity, because I just sense there's a bit of slippage here.
So absolutely. So the business case will identify what is considered in the minds of HBRIC as being a contracted volume of water.
Okay. And
it's fair to say through the whole, I've got Graham sitting here as well, if there are questions around construction. But a substantial part of our work in the last 3 months has been optimising the distribution network, and so clearly there's an issue of contracted water and the ability to supply, which means getting a pipe past the gate, and where that exists and where it doesn't exist. So all of that stuff's part of the process, but the point I would absolutely reinforce is that that's exactly what we're doing. So we've got a contract, we need to turn EOIs into contracted position. That's fundamental, and it's fair to say it won't be just the council land or HBRIC looking at that particular issue. It'll be all the other investors watching that with a great deal of interest.
One last question on this. So what is your?
Yep.
I know we're going to get it with absolute specificity when you bring the business case in in March, but what's your feel for a sense of it at this point?
I think converting significant, quite a significant number of those EIs into contracts is quite doable. Actually.
But when do you expect to have the?
Oh well, I would expect that we're going to run that process between now and the end of June.
So end of June, you'd expect to be.
Yep.
You'll have your numbers stacked up, solid.
And you'll be sitting there with a business case that says, here's the terms of investment. We will also give you a flavour of, because it gets a little bit complex, but I'll try and keep it simple. 40% ultimately you want to get this whole thing, the water or the reliable water contracted and take-or-pay contracts. And so there's what we call a demand curve and a set of scenarios around the demand curve. So we'll be showing you what that means basically in the time of that. Okay. Right. Okay. So just not a lot to say around EPA and consenting, other than that everybody's well aware of where the board inquiry sits with its timeframes. Moving on to design and construction. And look, I'll get.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Sorry,
on that point. This flurry of negotiating that occurred at the end the process between Nikki and I'm not sure what constellation of players on this side.
Principally HBRC, Councillor.
Then I'll address. So what the public document would indicate that there's still significant areas of disagreement. There are other areas of agreement. And what bearing does that have on this at this stage of the game?
Could you clarify which public document you're referring to, the Memorandum of Council?
The two memoranda that are filed, yes.
Yeah, okay. There's not so much disagreement as unresolved yet. So there's still, as I explained, I think, to an answer to a question that you asked earlier today, we've been trying to set up meetings both at a board and council level with Nikki, but also at a staff level as well, and we're really in their hands. They want to have some more discussion internally before they come back to us, but we're aware that there's still several things that just need signing off, particularly around I was going to say help me out Ian, but he's gone, just some agreements around the socioeconomic their participation in the socioeconomic effects working party, and particularly around the terms of reference for a Tukituk catchment working group, which would look at the lining up the traditional Western science, if you like, with the Maori and Maori of a monitoring framework. So it's not disagreement, it's just these issues weren't resolved satisfactorily to all parties at the time that the memoranda had to be submitted by, which was the 8th of February.
Okay. All right, so moving on to design and construction. We have a fixed time, fixed price offer for construction, which was received on the 14th of February. That is a pretty substantial milestone, really. It's one of the 5 major work streams, and it's fair to say that we are. We believe we've got a good result out of that, actually, clearly. And so Graham's here if you've got any specific questions, but it's fair to say that what we did in November of 2013, we'd had the 2 construction consortia, OHL Hawkins and Boyd, pitch up bids to us. That went through a major assessment process, involved 7 experts on an assessment panel, as well as 35 other experts sitting behind that process. So it's been extremely rigorous. Then what we did was we identified the preferred reserved of the 2 and entered into a specific negotiation with the preferred, and in that process we've optimised, which we always intended to do. So by optimisation, that means the refinements. So the optimisation, actually, to be fair, is predominantly across the distribution network, but it's ultimately about really designing a system that's moved substantially past what was the feasibility proposition, going back to 2012, into a significantly designed proposition, costed, and with the cost and risk allocation identified and located where appropriate. So it's fair to say that negotiation, bar a couple of little tweaks, is done, right? And maybe I'll just hit sort of a couple of the key issues there that we've identified, created a couple of questions. One is we've identified, in terms of reliable water, 104 million cubic metres. That is not all water necessarily stored in the dam at any one time. It's a combination of water that's also delivered without losses in the distribution network. And the other really major development here, compared to feasibility, is that we've designed a pressure system to what we call a 35 metre head. And that effectively internalises the cost of pressurisation pumps, maintenance, all that sort of stuff inside the scheme, as opposed to having that dealt with by an individual farming business.
Just
Yep.
an assessment, Andrew. How